and I was on the way to a gig in New Jersey, and I was passing the exit to Piscataway, New Jersey. And so like when I went back and wrote the tune, I'm like, what am I going to call this? And I said, well, in honor of that moment that I reconnected with that tune. So Piscataway went that away.
Welcome to episode 67 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. Double bassists, stop by lemurmusic.com for everything you need for the double bass. Not only everything you need, probably a bunch of stuff you want also. Everything you want and need for the double bass can be found at lemurmusic.com. Stop by, check it out. Their collection of bows, basses, bass accessories, preamps, and more. lemurmusic.com. TsunamiCables.com, my favorite cables on the market. They come with a lifetime guarantee. No more buying 10-foot cables on the way to a gig. That's over, folks. TsunamiCables.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. You can also listen to episode 51 of the Bass Shed podcast, where I talk with the owner of Tsunami, Keith Sticks. TsunamiCables.com. TrickfishAmps.com. Stop by the website, use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. Check out their line of cabinets, check out their line of bass heads, and check out their preamps, the Minnow and the Trilobite. The Minnow is a single channel, the Trilobite is a dual channel and a B-box. Stop by TrickfishAmps.com, use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. For regular listeners of the podcast, I'm sure you've heard me talk to guests that I have cut my debut record. It is not out yet, and I will be talking more about it when it is finally released. The record is titled Smile, after the Charlie Chaplin song. If you listen real close, you can hear Charlie Chaplin turning over in his grave. I think that happened somewhere around take 3. Of cutting his tune. I wrote an arrangement, nothing like I'm sure how he intended it. Sorry, Charlie. Sorry, dude. My bad. Anyways, I will have more information about that when it's released, and as it gets closer, you can stop by ryanrobertsbass.com. That's my personal website for more information and some like backstories on the tunes and kind of where a lot of the material came from. The Bass Shed is also on social media. Hit me up at the Facebook. That's right. I sound like a 90-year-old woman. Is he on the Facebook? Yeah, that's right, Edna. I'm on the Facebook. Facebook.com/The Bass Shed. Instagram at The Bass Shed. Twitter at Bass Shed. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the little blue birdie. Hit whatever's on Instagram. I don't know. Is it a camera? Is it just a follow button? I think it's just a follow button. I'm trying to do the Edna joke again. What did I just call it? Oh, the Facebook. That's what I said. I said the Facebook. Where's the clicker? Are you watching the Facebook? On the show is modern jazz composer and bassist Mark Wade. Mark Wade's critical success has led to him being named one of the top bassists of the year for 5 of the last 6 years in Downbeat magazine Reader's Poll. He's received international acclaim for his trio with the 2015 recording Event Horizon. He later released a follow-up record in 2018 titled Moving Day. And now, Mark Wade has a new record released March 11th, 2022, titled True Stories. True Stories is a record that is acknowledges all the influences that for Mark along the way. He pulls from music of Miles Davis, the music of Charles Mingus, the music of Igor Stravinsky. So he really goes a lot of places, and it's a modern jazz record, but it's not just pulling from jazz history, which I think is beautiful. What I also loved about this record was that it's not just, like, all right, cool, I dig the Miles 60s quintet, so I'm gonna play a tune that the Miles 60s quintet did and then call it a day. Maybe you know how jazz musicians get with this stuff. Like, oh, okay, we're going to take the Miles 60s Quintet, for instance. Like, cool, dig the Miles 60s Quintet. Honestly, I can't imagine most jazz musicians not liking the 60s Quintet. But it's not like he's just going to play a tune and maybe do a little reharm or change a time signature. Like, he really got into the fabric of the tune and his compositional approach to this record in acknowledging the past influences and kind of bringing that into a present day with his own voice was absolutely brilliant and a true work of artistry in itself, just from a compositional aspect. Then he plays great on the whole record. Yeah, his phrasing is fantastic. Mark has also been on the podcast before. He was on episode 25. That's when we talked about his recording Moving Day. And it was great to have him on the show again and talk about this latest record. I always enjoy talking to Mark Wade, and I can't speak highly enough about this recording. So here's my talk with bassist and composer Mark Wade. Man, how you been? It's been a little while.
It's been a minute. I'm doing okay, man. How are you? It's good to see you.
Likewise. I'm doing all right. I'm glad things are, different than the last time we spoke.
Yeah.
That was what, about a year ago?
Yeah, it was probably like a year and a half ago. That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the lockdown had just happened. I vaguely remember that.
Year and a half ago. Yeah, for sure.
Oof, what a ride it's been. Man, thanks for contacting me and dropping me a copy of your new record, True Stories. I know you told me what the concept was of it.
Yeah.
So talk about the concept, and then I played a little game with myself after I heard about the concept. I wanted to see if I could find the tunes.
Okay.
But go ahead and talk about the concept.
Okay, so the concept behind the new record here, True Stories, it's 8 tunes that are all inspired by composers that I really like or songs that I really like, if I get specific. So in some cases, I'm taking actual thematic material from those tunes and then writing a new tune around it. And other times it's a little looser than that. It might be a concept or more loosely inspired by. So the influences on the record would run from the very mainstream, like Miles Davis, right? And the second tune on there, Falling Dolores, is actually it's 2 Wayne Shorter tunes from the Miles Davis quintet from the 60s group. And where, if you've even remotely familiar with that group and some of those tunes, then you would hear some of that material. Yeah. And there's other stuff that would be a little bit more obscure that maybe wouldn't be as readily known to a general listening audience.
Sure. So the game I was playing was if I could figure out the influence. That's the game I was playing. Some I was close. Some I was close. Some I was I was not even in the ballpark. And then I read about it, and then I'm like, okay, I kind of hear how I got what I got, but I wasn't close at all. So let's talk about the first tune.
Sure.
I feel more like I do now. So originally when I was making notes for this, I just wrote down Freedom Jazz Dance. I'm like, yeah, Freedom Jazz Dance. And then that one seemed to nail it.
You got it. That was totally right on. And that one's not as obvious because it's, it's not a complete straight reading of the tune, but man, good for you. Good ears, man.
The second one, I definitely heard the Wayne Shorter influence. Mm-hmm. And then I was actually going back through a bunch of records trying to find the song that I was hearing in my head. I never quite found the song, but like I was listening through Adam's Apple. I pulled up Juju and, some of the other records. I never quite found what I thought I heard, but speak about song number 2.
Yeah, so Falling Dolores, like the giveaway here is in the title. It's actually it's Fall and Dolores, the 2 tunes that are from Wayne's time with the Miles Davis, quintet. And I love those records. Like when it comes to Miles Period, that's probably my favorite.
Sure.
Miles Smiles was the very first record I even bought, jazz record of any
Okay.
kind that I bought. So, that Freedom's Jazz Dance influence ended up on the album is not by accident, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that tune is kind of interesting because it's in some ways it's the most direct quote to like another composer, in the sense that right off the bat, the very first thing you hear is a reharmonization and a slightly reworking of Fall. And then it goes into an original tune I wrote. And that's kind of the bulk of the tune. And it goes in and out of that Fall and my tune. And then at the end, this kind of a coda send-off is Dolores, the tune Dolores. But the harmony is reworked so that it's over the form of the tune I wrote. So I realize it's getting really nerdy, composer kind of stuff here. Like that only I'm impressed with myself, upon this. But it's I tried my best. With all these tunes, I really tried to not just have it sound like a cover tune.
Sure.
Right? Like you're trying to really make it something that is my music, where you're trying to blend those two things together. So
yeah, no. When reading the title, my first inclination was Falling Grace. I was expecting to hear some of that. Now this one, the third tune. Talk about the third tune, and then I'll talk about all the notes I made that were fails. This one's pretty cryptic.
Yeah, this one is not obvious. Yeah, this one is really not obvious. It's this, of all the tunes on the record, this one would be the least direct and the most kind of big picture. So the Soldier in the Fiddle was inspired by Igor Stravinsky's Histoire de Soldat, A Soldier's Tale, one of the few pieces of classical music that bass players get to play in the chamber music repertoire. And that piece was always known as Stravinsky's jazz piece. And I think it's because Stravinsky was a huge fan of jazz, and it really influenced him. And this would be one of those works that people would point to as where he got some of his inspiration from like early jazz music in the 1920s. So that particular piece, Histoire, it features, the bass player plays a lot of what sounds like a march style rhythm. This dump, 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 dump in the beginning of the very first movement. And it sounds like that the tune is a march, right? That it's in two, but around it are these constantly shifting meters. So that when you look at the music, it's in 5/8 and 3/4 and all these exotic meters, and it changes all the time. So I didn't do anything quite that crazy, but what I did was the whole tune is based on this idea of 3 measures of 4 and a measure of 3, and then 3 measures of 4 and a measure of 3, so that the what sounds like the downbeat becomes the upbeat, but then it becomes the downbeat again.
Right.
And it loops around like that, which is kind of what happens in that Stravinsky piece. So there's no thematic material I took directly from Histoire de Soldat, from A Soldier's Tale. There's no direct musical quotes. So yeah, this one is a little bit more, there's a lot of this is more my music and just the concept from the Stravinsky.
But I feel like that one really did a great job at creating this kind of epic going off to battle feel. And what happens with the drummer later in the track, very reminiscent of all that still. So it was still very much thematic, and I forget the term. I know you're well versed in classical music too. What's the term where you write characters?
Oh, so it's kind of like a leitmotif, like where the music represents a thing, a specific thing, or a character. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that a lot in this. It was really fun to listen to. I thought that it was influenced by a contemporary jazz person, somebody who's like still with us. It sounded very modern to me, and I'm like, okay, where's this coming from? No, I don't quite hear that. I don't quite hear that. But it sounded like somebody that was, on the scene, or maybe something like that. And then I found out it was Stravinsky. And I'm like, oh man, no, way off. That was cool. Talk about track 4 is In the Market.
In the Market. So, I mean, of all the tunes on here, in some ways, you could say this is the most of a cover tune, to a certain degree, just because I didn't do a lot of writing of my own original themes with this so much as I just reworked some of the original material enough that to try to make it sound like it was not the same. So In the Market is takes from a couple of tunes in particular off of the Black Market album by Weather Report. Right, it was the album that was kind of happening right as Jocko was transitioning into the band. So like Jocko's on like some of the tracks, but he's on like a couple, but he's not on all of them. It was my first Weather Report record, and it's still my favorite.
Okay,
I just love this record, and I love the tunes on it. It's just always been an important record for me.
I'm actually surprised. I think most bass players' first Weather Report record is Heavy Weather.
Sure, that's the one that everybody gets.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
that's the one with Teen Town and all the that's Jocko's big deal. Did you spend more time with Weather Report going back further after Black Market?
Not a ton. I mean, not a ton. I know that band was really important to my teacher, Mike Richmond, when I was at NYU. Like he still talks about like the early, especially the stuff actually pre-Jocko when Miroslav was in the band. That was like
Miroslav and Alfonso.
Yeah, and that was big. That was big for him, and so he always kind of pushed me towards that. Personally, I love the music, but there's just something about Black Market, and it's an odd album when you think about it because. I mean, you're hearing like the old band and the new band. It's almost like you're seeing two bands on the same record. You know, it's literally the ship is leaving the station for
Changing
one guy.
of the guard. Yeah,
it's literally happening for you in real time, right, track by track. But there's just the themes. I mean, the opening track, Black Market, obviously a big one that figures into my reworking. But also, I think Hernando was another one, and actually a few different tracks I tried to kind of reference in there and reharmonize it and change it around and do a bunch of stuff to it to try to make it sound like it was not just a straight up reading of the record,
Sure. And I mean, a way you do that is it's a swing tune.
Yeah.
So like that's, when I saw In the Market, my first thought was Black Market, but then I was expecting to hear something fusiony. And it wasn't, maybe like Steps Ahead or something like that.
Right.
But it wasn't. And it almost had a Chick Corea trio feel to it.
Yeah.
It had that. And then that's actually something I would continue hearing throughout different tracks. I don't know if was intended and written into the material or Chick was a big influence on your piano player.
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, on me, too. Certainly like the acoustic Chick Corea stuff, like Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's the art of the trio before Brad Meldau. I mean, I love Brad, and I love Brad Meldau, and he's an influence for sure. But I mean, like to me, like that's the very modern jazz trio. For me, the Chick stuff. So if you heard it, it's unintentional, but totally understandable.
Okay. Now, another trio that I felt was referenced was the next track. You pronounce Piscataway?
Piscataway, New Jersey, baby.
Okay, that's what that means.
Yeah.
Piscataway Went That Away is the title of the track. Yeah. The tempo and the feel of it took me straight to Oscar Peterson.
Okay.
Like that's just where Ray digging in, like go. That's where that landed for me. But now, what was intended in it?
Well, this was Fred Hirsch. This is a nod to another great modern piano trio, Fred Hirsch. Who's such a brilliant guy, brilliant trio. I heard there's a Live at the Vanguard CD that I used to listen to a lot, and this tune Swamp Thing was on that record. And he's done, I think, a few different versions of this that go actually really fast and all these different kind of tempos. But the particular version I was familiar with initially was this one that was a bit slower. And I was like on the way, it came on the radio and I hadn't heard it in like 10 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I love this track and how much I love that record. And I was on the way to a gig in New Jersey and I was passing the exit to Piscataway, New Jersey. and so like when I went back and wrote the tune, I'm like, what am I going to call this? And I said, well, in honor of that moment that I reconnected with that tune. So Piscataway Went That Away.
Okay. I like it. Track 6, A Simple Song. This one, again, I heard Chick Corea, and I think the initial Chick tune I heard was Folk Song from the Three Quartets.
Okay.
That's and then I started thinking like that's the second Chick reference. Maybe I just need to go listen to Chick. Like maybe it's tumbling around in there. Maybe I got to go listen to that. We'll talk about this song.
So this one is a tribute to one of my teachers when I was at New York University, Frank Kimbrough, who passed away 2020, I believe. Died of a heart attack very suddenly. It was a shock to a lot of people. Frank lived just a few blocks away from me.
Oh, wow.
I used to still see him. Even I would be, I'd be hanging out with him once in a while here in the neighborhood, and he was always a big influence on me musically. When I came to school at NYU, he had just kind of started teaching there, and Frank was one of those musicians. Sometimes you connect with people, I should say, and they confirm your musical worldview, right? And you really are into them because they're like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I want you to talk about that. Show me how to do this. Show me how to do that. Sure. And Frank was someone who actually challenged my musical worldview, I would say. Like his music was not something that I understood or initially gravitated towards. And because I took a lot of time with it and kind of checked it out, and it was something that I then did grow to really embrace and became really meaningful to me. And I studied with him privately and, all this kind of stuff. So there was a track off of one of his records that he had totally forgotten about. When I mentioned this to him, he didn't even remember the record or the track. But he was like, what? Yeah. But there was the last tune on one of his, it was a record of his, Lulla Blue By might have been the title of the record. And the last track was called Eventualities. Mm-hmm. And it was this very kind of dark and spacey thing that did a lot of things that I particularly liked. So I thought so for that one, the part of the melody you hear is his line, and part is a new line that I wrote to go with it, and then the form and all that other stuff is very different. But it's a tribute to Frank, and poignantly more so because I wrote the tune. He was still with us, but now that the album is coming out, unfortunately, we've lost him. So kind of a nice way to do a little something for him, I guess.
Yeah. And now, what were some ideals that you felt were challenged by his music? That's how you said that was really fascinating. I'm curious about it.
It's a really good question. I used to see Frank, and there was a group of people that was part of something called the Jazz Composers Collective here. Ted Nash was the horn player in that. Ted is now one of the horn players in the Lincoln Center Band, and a number of other players here in town, really great players. They would bring new music to their concert. They would only play new music. They would only play their music. And this was like once a month they would do this. And all of them kind of had this bent of like new music, your music, something new, something different, challenge yourself with a sound that you weren't comfortable with before in general. And specifically with Frank, there was a certain amount of space and freedom in his music that did not rely on pyrotechnics or, like huge virtuosity on the instrument. Not that he couldn't play the instrument, but he chose a style that went in that direction that was not something I would have gravitated towards. It's hard to put it all exactly into words, but it was a concept of listening, a concept of an ensemble, concept of a composer, that just I had not considered before in my younger musical life. And so and he was very true to his vision. Let's just say, like, he was very really I don't want to say orthodox, but like that sounds, it has a negative connotation maybe, but he was really, he believed in what he believed, and he really was willing to see that through. And that was also something that I really appreciated from him.
It was mainly to do with space.
Yeah, I mean, musically, space, time, like the idea of playing in time and then maybe not playing in time, or were like you could never quite tell were they in time or not in time. There's a certain aspects of that. If I was to distill it down to a specific musical thing, when you'd listen to some of his recordings, it was really interesting how they would be sort of in time, but they weren't really in time, but it wasn't completely loose. There was still a form. They followed that form, but they just took chances as to kind of maybe when each measure would exactly happen.
Oh, okay.
And it was a really interesting listening concept and challenging for an ensemble to know exactly, so it wasn't about, groove 4/4,
Sure.
Oscar Peterson trio. It was this other kind of thing. And then, with a certain amount of space involved, totally blew my mind, was very challenging to understand at first. But, even if I didn't try to copy everything he did, just that spirit of adventure and, trying to look for something different has always made a big impression on me.
Sure. Now, because that is something that you've absorbed and is now a part of your musicianship, obviously it comes out when you lead your own trio. Is it something you think about when leading your trio, or you just let it come out to whatever degree it's in there and it's just part of your musicality? Or is it something you consciously work towards?
It's a good question. I would say there was a track off my very first record that was like a conscious decision. Like when I wrote it, like, let me try to write a framework where I can try to make this musical concept happen. So that was definitely a conscious choice.
Okay.
And it was new to me. And I said, rather than wait for someone else to write a song like this for me to do, I'll write one for myself.
That's what it's for. Yeah.
And it actually ended up, it was a track that we all really enjoyed playing, and it was fun. And since then, I haven't tried to push that element, but like it comes out when it is more of a natural thing that comes out in a tune I write, where I might do that for some time, or a lot of time, or maybe not do it. So for me, at least when it comes to this concept of like time or not time, in and out of time, I will say though that it would probably be like more of a thing that I'm kind of orchestrating ahead of time as a composer. And then maybe how it plays out in performance is, of course, something you just leave to the moment, and see what happens.
Yeah, that was going to be something about that was going to be the next question, was like not only as a composer, but how it influences your actual playing. Yeah. Because specifically in your trio, you have a set trio. It's always the same guys. So there's a level of trust there that would facilitate that kind of concept.
Yes. And that's super
versus
important.
Just like a pickup gig. And you're trying to like get through something like that, which is not going to happen.
No, I totally agree. And the it's funny because I'm going to play a session this evening, with some friends here in town, not my band. And they're always saying like, bring some tunes. And I'm like, I can't bring those tunes, because that's not, it's not just like a head chart and then we'll like blow over the form and play the head and then, yay for us. We, we played a tune.
Hey, we traded fours.
We traded fours again, guys. We did it. Pop
this is groundbreaking stuff.
I know. But like, because it's not appropriate to bring to a jam session, and probably not very fun for people to sit and read. They don't want to take like a time to go through like my concept for this or that. Sure. That's what my band is for. Like, and you're, like you said, it's been the same band since, what was our first gig was like 2013 or 2014. And, so like now if you bring that stuff in, it does kind of happen and you don't have to really talk about it, but we've already laid the groundwork for that. And that's not what, for the jam session, it's, Take the Coltrane or something like that.
Right. Well, on the topic of having the same trio for so long, as a bass player, knowing the piano player's style and the drummer's style and what they do, you're just comfortable with their playing. How do you push them in new ways?
Well, that's a good question. You can't tell people how to play. And at least I certainly don't believe in that. The whole point for this group is that it's the three of us having a musical conversation. So maybe it's not even about me pushing them in new directions, but sometimes allowing myself to be pushed in new directions by the way they play, because they're in some ways they're both kind of very different players, different person, and which comes out, their personalities come out so much, in their music. Sometimes that's not true. You might get someone who's very quiet and they sit down at the instrument and it's like they're like a lion, they just roar for days, or maybe vice versa. But my drummer, more of a gregarious personality. He's a little bit more outspoken, and my piano player, a little bit more understated.
Okay.
And so musically, at least to me now, having played with them so long and known them so long, I see how those personalities come out.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I listen back to recordings and listen to stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that is us.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of who we are, and it makes sense. If I'm pushing them, it would generally be in the music that I write. To me, this band all starts from the point where you're composing. It's what I'm going to write, and I'm going to have this kind of groove and these kind of changes, this kind of concept. We're going to play a tune with lots of sections. It does a bunch of crazy things, or we're going to try to do a tune that's really stripped down, and we have to do something different in that regard. So for me, it's the framework. It's the framework for the improvisers. If you're writing good music, you're giving the band as an ensemble and then as individuals improvising an interesting, maybe challenging framework in which they have to do their thing that is not just the F blues again.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That does make you think and go, huh. At the same time, it can't be about just like writing a bunch of hard stuff, because that's not helpful either. It's not just difficult or strange, but I think that's really the nuance you're trying to capture as a band leader of quality, not weird or new for the sake of new but quality as well. And that's always a balancing act, I think.
Sure. When it comes to playing bass on your own original material, now let me how do I want to set up this question? Let's say if you're playing a standard, right?
Right.
You can easily, because there's so much, everybody already knows, there's context already established, reharmonization on the fly, all that stuff. That's a way you can push people around a little bit, on during the performance. When it comes to playing original material, how do you look for that payoff to kind of nudge them around? Are they comfortable enough with the material that if you drop some like downbeats on these notes, they're like, oh, okay, you just made the chord that?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I would say in the music that I'm writing, it's less about, oh, check out my cool reharm in this whole section, because the harmony is kind of specifically written to take you in a certain place. It's how we treat that harmony. Sure, I'm not saying that it can never change, but it might be more about like what kind of ideas and thematically how you're stretching, rhythmically how you're stretching over that, where you've left space and before it was maybe, very busy. More things like that. I think when we're taking chances and when we're comfortable we're taking chances, it's more about stretching in that way as opposed to, oh, I put this chromatic 2/5 in here, or I did some cool jazz nerdy, harmony thing. Sure. Because the changes I wrote on a lot of this stuff, the material needs those changes to be those changes. And they're kind of, in my opinion, interesting enough to expand upon as opposed to like doing anything radically different in that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, who are some composers besides the ones that are referenced on this record that you go to for harmonic information?
That's a good question.
I feel like Wayne Shorter is a wealth of harmonic.
That would be
prowess.
my number. He's always the number one thing that I come back to from a harmony standpoint or a sound standpoint. These days there isn't really a specific person I'm going to and looking. I feel like it's a little bit more of a equal opportunity. If I hear this sound over there, I might grab that. If I'm listening to the radio and I hear somebody I don't know, I do know they did a thing. Oh, that was cool. I mean, the Stravinsky piece, as much as that is influenced by Stravinsky, I had heard someone else do something vaguely similar. This idea of this ostinato repetitive bass thing on a concert probably 10 years ago. And maybe filed it away in the back of my head. And it wasn't exactly this kind of song, but when this came up, I remember thinking Stravinsky, but like, oh, I'd heard something similar to that too. So it's hard to say, I mean, Mingus, if I have to throw out a name, Mingus would be somebody, harmonically very interesting, even if I don't write a ton of music that sounds like him, and there is a reference to him on this album. His writing, particularly for the orchestra, even though I'm not writing big band stuff, just harmonically, What a sound concept, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, man, it was years and years ago, like really digging into what was happening with Goodbye Pork Pie Hat
Sure.
melodically. And, you know, if I remember correctly, and maybe there's someone out there who's going to totally like, no, that's not what it is at all. I don't know if I remember this correctly. So I'm going to preface, the melody landed like F minor pentatonic or something. It was really, and then all these changes are happening underneath. And that was so captivating to me that like this could have easily just been a modal tune,
Right.
you know, or he could have followed all these chord tones and he could have created a whole guide tone line through the whole thing and built the melody that way. And it's that kind of juxtaposition was really fascinating to me.
That's one of my favorites. That's one of my favorite ways of listening to music, and as a writer, that exact same concept, this idea of like maybe a minor pentatonic melody with just where those with the chords underneath making those things land in places on the chord you wouldn't expect. So you could listen to the tune and be like, wow, what a crazy tune, or what a hard melody that is. You're like, oh no, it's a very simple melody. It's the harmony that makes it sound so different.
Right. But then I feel like that approach also gives it continuity, because if you were just playing, you know, chord tones off all these chords that are kind of not related to the same key center, well, then where are we at? What are we doing? There's no home base here.
Yeah. I totally agree. You know, and really, I think Wayne Shorter very much is in that bag as well. I mean, you can find some beautiful tunes he wrote where they're really simple pentatonic, more or less, maybe some, you know, with some variations, some pentatonic kind of melodies. And I always that's a particular aspect that I've always gravitated towards as a composer, because if you think about it as a listener, you can really grab onto this, what is a basic, simple musical structure of like a simple pentatonic melody, and you've changed the chords underneath, and now you've made that a really exciting experience. And yet you can still relate to this very strong and basic musical statement. Yeah. As opposed to going for like the, someone described this recently as the sandstorm approach to melody, where it's just like a blast of notes coming at you. Just, you know, this, look at my amazing chromatic line through all these chords you can't follow. Yeah. There's a time and place for that, but for me, it's not all the time and not every place.
Sure. That's fair. Getting back to the record. So we are now on to the last two tracks, 7 and 8. Talk about these two.
Well, I mentioned Mr. Mingus, and here we go. So in a way, I lied that like there's no cover tune on the record. But this was done very intentionally. So, "Song with Orange," a really famous tune of Mingus's with the big band. I think it's on Mingus or it's Mingus Dynasty, one of the two records. Anyways, love the track. One of those amazing Mingus compositions where there's like an introduction, and then there's another section which doesn't seem to be somehow related to that introduction, and then a third section which is also a different tune, and it all works together in an amazing way. It's like this, really great journey that you go on, all just within this one track. So I thought what I would do is I would replace Mingus's introduction and second part of this tune with my own tune that was meant to sound like something that Mingus would write. And then the second half of the tune is the famous kind of minor swing thing that people will, tend to remember if you know his music from "Song with Orange." It's the more up-tempo part. So I kept that. So the Mingus part of the tune is like the Mingus part of the tune. I didn't change anything. Yeah. But the first part, the ballad part, which is this introduction and ballad part that I wrote, is again an homage to Mingus, and try to do something where you sounded like it could have been written together by the same person. Sure.
A big thank you from hopefully the jazz community for not just doing a record of contrafacts. Because initially I'm like, okay, inspired by, well then, like, great, we're just dealing with new melodies here. Right. But this is a very, very thoughtful record in how you approached all of this and piecing it all together. And it also reminded me of Chris Potter's Gratitude.
Oh, okay.
If you remember that record where he kind of nods to all of his, I believe that's just tenor or saxophone heroes. I don't know if he touched composers as well. But yeah, fun concept. Great record, man. Great record.
Thank you.
When is it actually released?
So the release date, street date, is March 11.
Okay.
Here, for like North America, the release is going to be Mark Wade Music. I'm releasing it myself here in North America, and for pretty much everywhere else, EU, Japan, there's a label in Norway that's handling it, AMP Music and Records.
Okay.
So for anybody listening, if you're outside of the US, you get it through AMP, but you can always get the information, off my website. It's pretty easy to find. So.
And then what was their strategy for delaying the release over there? What's the point of that?
Well, the release date will be, and I'm sorry if I misspoke, the release date will be exact same. So like the 11th here and also the 11th over there.
I see. Okay.
They're not handling the US because they're really just set up to handle like Europe and like the UK and stuff.
Okay.
And
so they're just managing that over there, but it still all gets released the same. Okay,
That's
maybe
right.
I just misunderstood.
Yeah.
What record is this for you? I remember the last time we spoke, we talked about your record, Moving Day.
Yeah, so this is the third one with the trio, but in between Moving Day and this one, I put out like a solo EP, this Songs from Isolation business, a solo bass record during the pandemic. So, Songs from Isolation, title pretty self-explanatory there.
Yeah.
It was a home recording project, but it was a video project as well. So it was actually 5 videos instead of just 5 audio tracks of like this solo bass record where I, often, built the band out of the bass parts and did a bunch of wacky things like that. So, but this is really the third full album with the trio.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing to see the evolution of the band from the first record to this record. Just my own personal evolution. Pretty amazing to think that I'm 3 records in with this. So
that's great, man. Congratulations. And what things have you noticed when you listen to this record and you kind of A/B it against the first record you did, or maybe some bootlegs of early rehearsals, or even, when you audition the guys, whatever.
Yeah.
What are you hearing that's different in your own playing? And obviously the group sound, everybody's going to figure each other out, understand like all that stuff. What are you hearing in your own bass playing that's grown?
I mean, I just feel like I just better at everything, like I just, like, which is good. I mean, it's nice. How about that practice actually works? It pays off, but it's just, there's, I'm just a lot more confident in being able to, I have an idea and then I can play that idea a lot more. I mean, the obvious, of course, technically I feel a lot more sound on the bass, but that's not nothing because, you can talk about music and concept and, your feelings all you want, but if you can't play it on the instrument, if you don't have the technique to play it on the instrument, ain't nobody going to hear it.
Sure.
And the acoustic bass, every instrument's challenging to play, but acoustic bass, tough to play, especially if you're going to be a soloist and you're going to play all around the instrument and try to do it with some clarity and some facility. It's always a challenge. I definitely hear that as an improvement, but also very much just as an ensemble player, as an accompanist, when it's not my turn. It's not just about playing better solos, but I just feel like I contribute more to the band as a rhythm section player, and in the ensemble.
How do you go about playing with the same guys in your trio and continue and not get stuck in this idea of this is how I play with these guys? And kind of cage yourself in. How do you go about keeping your own playing fresh?
It's a good question. I mean, one, I have musical experiences outside of this trio. I mean, we play together regularly, but I do a bunch of different things. So that by itself, of course, helps, and so do they. So they don't come in just saying, well, just time to punch the clock and make the donuts. Right. There's that. But I think that for me, all of this stuff always comes back to the writing.
Yeah.
If I'm writing music with consciously not trying to force it too much, but with the idea that okay, we did that already. I don't need to write that song again that does this thing and is kind of similar. We did that. What else can I do? What else can I write? What would be a challenge for me to play? Oh, in maybe like this and have this other thing happen. I'm trying to be very general here, but it all comes back to the writing. If I can find a way to work that in with the writing, then it almost always seems to work out when it's time to hit the stage.
Mm-hmm. I do it myself when writing. I challenge myself in new ways. And it's always something I want to learn, right? I'm writing exercises for myself and whatever, put a melody and some chords around it. But really the focus is this side thing over here for me. I don't know if that's narcissistic. It probably is. I don't know.
It's all narcissistic, man.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all there.
Yeah, it's all the same. Now I lost my train of thought.
Yes.
Oh, it was something about, I forgot the exact question. But I'll write things that are aimed at me to practice. Do you practice composing outside of the material you bring to the group, or do you just kind of like flush out a tune and be like, okay, that's good enough to bring into the trio, let's see if this can fly or not?
It's probably more the latter, the second version. If I'm writing at this point, it's almost habit that I'm writing with my trio in mind. That being said, I have actually the latest little writing project that I've embarked on. It has been and this is not to sound pretentious but like really to just be able to write a 32 bar tune. No vamps, no this, no that, no 7-page adventure. Yeah. Like just write a 32 bar tune, because none of the music, and in fact, like a conscious decision of mine has been to not write those kinds of tunes for my band, to try to get more creative and do something different.
Right. But now like the challenge is to write a lead sheet.
Yeah, just write a lead sheet. Don't put a drum vamp in there. Don't put it in like 7 this and go into that.
Make
like
it in 4 at 110.
Yeah, exactly. And write something good, and write something decent. Sure. And so I've actually written like a whole bunch of tunes lately that are like, essentially are just lead sheet tunes.
Okay.
So that's actually been really fun. And it's the kind of thing that isn't necessary for just my trio, that I could maybe hand to other people. Sure. And there's a practical side to that, and that is, I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to travel a little bit more in my music and get out of the country. And when you do that, as I learned the hard way the very first time, that when you only have an hour to meet your band after you get, from the airport, and it's like, you're jet lagged out of your mind, and, you maybe you want to have some tunes in there that everybody can read down and not freak out about too much. So
yeah, something that doesn't require 5 rehearsals and 7 years of playing together.
Correct. So, so maybe not the tunes from this record, maybe some tunes that are still quality, still sound like my music.
Sure.
But yeah, let's just read it down and do it.
How far down that rabbit hole did you go? Did you really kind of dig into the sound of the American Songbook and, put some 1-6-2-5s in there and some, the bridge goes to 4, then, did you do all that?
I didn't go that far.
Okay.
I didn't go that far. I think my idea of playing more straight ahead is to make it sound like a Wayne Shorter tune, I suppose, or something like that, and that's kind of, it's probably my easiest default is to just like, to do something more along those lines, but simple forms, digestible harmonies, not 2-5-1, not 2-5-1 to the 4 chord or that kind of thing as far as American Songbook, because if it is a situation specifically where I've got to travel and my name is on the marquee, I feel like I still want it to sound something like the album that I sent them to get the gig in the first place.
Of course.
Like if they hear this, they hear a modern jazz record and they book me in this club, they probably want to hear some modern jazz music. Right. Nothing wrong with standards. I love them and totally can play them, and it's so much fun. But I think in those instances, for me anyways, I feel somewhat responsible to have the music be representative, something along the lines of what they heard.
Yeah. How do you book all that yourself? How do you go about lining up these travel things? That seems like just like climbing Everest, with like bad tennis shoes. Like it seems so exhausting, just the idea of it.
It is totally exhausting. And it's not like I've been doing it for years, but it's really in the last few years that I've had those opportunities. Now, the last 2 years, obviously not. And so it's still somewhat in its infancy, but I do have some spots in the UK in particular, and now on the continent of people who are interested in my music, who want to bring me over for concerts. And then it's just the legwork of like getting the contacts, contacting these people, following up. It is a ton of work. But I'm lucky that, for the UK, I have a musical partner over there, a piano player by the name of Marco Marconi, who's been really helpful in setting things up. I did a tour over there. My first one was right before COVID hit. I was supposed to go back in November, and thanks to a mistake with the UK visa office, the whole tour got flushed. So that was, I'm still a little salty about that because these are not easy to set up.
Sure.
But luckily,
you lose a bunch of money on it?
Yeah, it was not a financial windfall, but just because the visa process itself is not free to go over there.
Okay.
Long story short, luckily I was able to rebook with everybody. Everybody was super understanding because we were waiting literally the day I was going to run to the airport to see if the passport came in the mail. It came like 3 weeks after I would have gotten home. Wow. And they what can you do? It was out of everyone's control. But so obviously the joys of travel and setting these things up is very difficult, but I am encouraged to do it. In fact, I've just spent a bunch of time today talking with folks over there. I guess what's encouraging is that I've been, and of course it's super hard, but when you do reach out and people do respond to your music and they're like, wow, I actually like this and I like it enough to hire you for a gig and you should come over here and do this. It is encouraging. And you need a little encouragement because it is kind of like climbing Everest.
Sure.
So with tennis shoes,
maybe
one tennis shoe.
Yeah, Crocs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole thing can be quite lonely at times. You're in the room composing and you're in your head too much to get these tunes composed, and you take them to the band, and there's for me there's a layer of self-loathing I have to work through. After I hear then I deal with that, then back to it, and then you're just in front of the computer sending things out, contacting people. So that's good. It's good that people are responding positively, and it's encouraging. With booking these tours, it also seems like something to navigate is making it financially feasible for yourself, the other people, hotel rooms, flights, all that stuff.
Instruments, if it's a double bass, I
was gonna go there. Do you rent them when you're overseas, or do you bring yours, or do you have a flyaway that you use?
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the point where I've bought the flyaway bass yet. Because I'm not doing it enough to sink that money in, because it's an investment to do that. But so for me, it means I get stuck with, I have to get a bass over there, and then you're kind of hoping for the best. And the first time I was over there, I was in Belgium and France, and I was splitting the tour with another band actually, and the bass player who was on the other band was gracious enough to let me play his instrument, and he had a nice bass, and it was fine, and it was cool. The last time I was in the UK, I was on a couple of different basses, and I was not maybe quite as fortunate as, for the instruments. So it's, what I've learned is it's trying to arrange that stuff ahead of time with people that Sure. So for the next time I go over to the UK, I already have a guy who can lend me his bass, and, it's a much better situation. It'll be better for the music with the kind of instrument it is. So all of those things, all this logistical stuff, whether it's and that's just the instrument, then you still got to get there and get the plane tickets to work out, and
it just seems crunching all the numbers and making sure that it's worth your time and effort, and it's actually is a good career move instead of just a money pit, and making sure you respect the musicians' time. And
that's right,
to get them over there, and so they're taken care of. Do you have a European band, or do you bring your guys?
See, I'm definitely using people over there, just for expenses. Of
course.
Because you need, you think about how much money you need just to bring the band over, between, you got to pay them and you got to pay for the travel and all that stuff. It's really quite expensive. If you land a big festival, which we'd all love to land, but of course, everybody and, thousands of people apply and 10 people get the spot. Right. If you don't land one of these things that is going to pay your way easy, then for me at this point, I'm using guys over there. And that makes it, it's a lot cheaper, obviously. And it also is helpful if you're using guys in the local territory, if they speak the language, they know the train schedules, they know okay, here's what you're going to need to know to get from this town to that town. Here's what this could cost. It helps a lot with planning the budget out when you kind of make it when you can partner with people who are in the territory. Without it, it's pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Are these musicians you knew prior to lining up these tours, or did you, how did you come across them, I guess?
Well, my toehold over there right now with my friend Marco that I mentioned before, who's in the UK. He's an Italian guy living in England. He's part of the jazz scene there in that London area. And both him and this drummer Emiliano Caroselli, another Italian guy living in London who has since moved back to Italy, these were guys that I kind of connected with through a mutual reviewer and DJ.
Okay.
Combination of like some like media people that were like, oh, you guys should meet, and
oh, great,
especially if you go over that way. So it was a good way to, a way that to get together that way, through some mutual friends. And that's generally now, as I'm making more contacts, it's people that I'm meeting online or people who I have connections with here who say, oh, you're going to try to go over there. You should talk to my friend so-and-so because I've been to that place and here's who you should talk to. Okay. That's super helpful. I think without it, it's pretty tough.
And then do they like hip you to the venues in the not neighborhood, but in the area? Or are there some you already have kind of pre-loaded in your mind of like, when I'm going here, either I'm going to look it up or these are the spots I know I want to play?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, like in the case of like the UK, because I'm like friends with this guy, like he's really helping me out quite a bit. Like he's helping me with contacts and stuff like that. And he's a great resource. If it's people that I don't know quite as well, they're helpful and friendly, but understandably they're going to, I kind of have to know a little bit about that myself. If you know the questions to ask, they'll answer them, but it's not so much that they're going to just like deliver you a manual with like how to make all this stuff work. You still have to do a lot of that stuff on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it like we talked, like I got a record coming out soon and I've been thinking about how to navigate all of that. And it seems daunting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have the mental or emotional bandwidth to really, with all the other things that have happening, to dig into it. Have you had assistance before with PR and booking, or have you been DIY from the get-go?
I have had assistance. You pay for that assistance, but I have, it was worth it for me. I put money behind all my album releases with PR, radio and print. And I'm doing that again this time. And it worked for me. I also did some of that stuff on my own. So the answer in some ways is both. Like I pushed the record myself, but I also had people to do it. Some of the PR folks, they can get your album in front of people that you couldn't get it in front of maybe. Sure. At the same time, I'm a firm believer that nobody is going to speak up for you as much as you will.
Of course.
And no one's going to believe in your project as much as you are. And if you can reach out and find people that way too, you're really going to cover some territory. So the PR stuff absolutely was kind of the launch pad for me to make these other connections that then got to the, like, actually go somewhere and play your instrument stage. Yeah. But I always say that all the PR game to get there, it's a long game, right? And it isn't even something that even happens the first record. But if you can develop a track record, it's all about a track record. I feel like, especially like for jazz and for like acoustic modern jazz, if you're not the biggest sensation overnight, it's about really building that track record and then getting people to listen to you. Sure. So,
sure. Have you found out that overseas is a little bit more receptive than the States?
I used to think that. I used to labor under that false pretext that like, oh, Europe, they just love jazz, American jazz musicians in Europe. And that's true, but it's much more complicated than that. What I have learned is each country is very much its own territory, and they have their own musical tastes, and they will respond to different kinds of jazz more than others. The UK, definitely a good place for my kind of music. Germany, good place for my kind of music. Italy, those are countries that will which people who live there, have said like, yeah, we are into this kind of stuff. American modern jazz is something that plays better there than maybe a country like France. Or, that you would think like, why not France? They have their own it's just a different market, and it's a different situation there. They're very proud of their French heritage. They protect their French artists quite a bit,
Sure.
So, there's a little bit of that going on. All those countries have that to a degree. It's pretty funny to see this stuff as an American going over there, realizing how regional and sectional some of this stuff can be.
How does that change your perspective on America when you come back and like, oh yeah, we do the same thing, but ours is all just pop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we protect Rihanna and Kanye. We're just as insulated.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's a different kind of thing. See, we're insulated because physically we can be totally removed from those folks. Like on an average day, if you live in America, you don't run into someone from Italy or Germany. But if you live in Germany, you might run into people from Italy, depending what part of the country you're in, or France, or all the So they're all right on top of one another. So they kind of are forced to deal with one another, even if they don't want to.
Yeah.
Or we don't have to do it. So,
and so we don't.
So we don't do it. So it's very interesting to watch, man. I love it.
Have you been out to clubs there, and have you seen or heard, the Germans play modern acoustic jazz, and like how that might be different in feel or texture from how Americans do it?
Not as much. It's if I'm playing over there with somebody from this area or that area, or, being in New York, you run into those people as well. Though sometimes they come here and, you meet people and play with them there. And it is different though. It's funny. It is a little different. The European aesthetic is different. And it's also a little hard to judge because like New York is its own animal anyways. And so if you're here, there's just certain expectations you have. If you call X player for Y gig, and these things have to happen in order for you to have a successful gig, here it's just assumed like those things will happen. And I've learned that you can't always assume that maybe as much when you leave the city.
Right.
That the same skill sets, are not universal. So yeah, people play different in different places. That being said, people play great all over. There's great musicians everywhere. So it's not as if like there's some like only Americans can play jazz. I mean, that's absolutely not the case. There's monster players all over the place, and that's also a very eye-opening experience.
Sure. I've been working a decent amount with the piano player who just moved to LA from New York, and he talks regularly about like things that happen and are just part of the LA musician culture. He's like, man, that would never happen in New York. That would never. So he has that conversation a lot, which I find fascinating. Yeah. And then, so we talk about those differences, sure. Guys in New York, like everybody knows this too. And I'm like, dude, everybody in LA knows this. Like, can you play that right now? He's like, no. I'm like, okay.
It's right.
Everything is so, I'm fascinated by the regional influence, not only of sound, but how it turns into like the working world ethos of it all. Like this is your survival. You need these skills to survive there.
That's
versus like you need these skills to survive here. That's fascinating to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mark, thanks so much, man. Looking forward to the new record being out. True Stories comes out March 11th. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Man, thanks for having me on, man. It's always great to catch up and chat, man. A lot of fun.
It is. Let's stay in touch. And if you're ever out this way, let's do a hang.
Man, I'd love to get out that way. Why do I have to always go across the ocean? Why can't I go the other way, man?
Yeah, right. You can go across the ocean from this direction too.
Yeah. That's a lot longer for me.
All right, man. We'll be in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Be good. See you later.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye now.
All right. That was my talk with bassist Mark Wade. I highly recommend that record. I highly recommend this record, True Stories. Everybody plays brilliant on it. It's a wonderful trio record. I love that Mark has dedicated himself to cultivating a trio. I know I talk a lot about this with friends that are musicians, here in town, that it's all about having a band. Like, you do these pickup gigs and stuff. It's like you really can't get into the thing. You know, you got to build this trust with people over time, and this sound. You cultivate a band sound, and I really love that Mark pursues that specifically with leading this trio and continuing to maintain the same trio, because that's really where the magic starts to happen. Again, check out this record, True Stories. I will have links up to it and Mark Wade at thebassshed.com/podcast/Mark Wade. If you're enjoying the Bass Shed podcast, please hit subscribe wherever you are listening to it, and consider, giving it a 5-star rating. That's right. I'm not even going to preface that anymore. Just boom, 5 stars. Like, just boom, right to it. 5 stars, huh? You know, tell some folks about it. If you're enjoying it, tell some other people about it. You know, tell your brother, your sister, your mama too. We're about to throw down. You know what to do. This little segment is brought to you by Cameo and the song Word Up. Yeah, folks, that's all I got. So, thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next one in a minute.